And welcome back to another episode of The Hard Truth. And as always, that hard truth is the hard truth that the weak just don't want to accept, but the strong has embraced, and they've ran right at those storms. Now, listen, when we talk about bringing people on the podcast, I'm looking to bring strong people. I'm not just looking to bring strong people physically. I'm looking to bring them mentally. I'm looking to they have emotional resilience. I'm looking to they have a solid beard. And let's just be honest, nobody checks all those blocks like my man, Matt Kafora. Matt, thank you so much for taking time to jump on the show with us today.
Thanks so much, Danny. I appreciate that. That's quite the intro.
I mean, it's an easy solid when we got somebody like you lined up for it. Guys, and when I reached out to Matt, and Matt's always generous with his time, and he's a busy man. Man has over 20 businesses. And really what we want to focus on in today's call is I know there's so many people out there that, you want to start a side hustle. You want to go live your dream. And maybe you feel bogged in a 9-to-5. Maybe you feel bogged in a job that you hate, and you're like, well, I just don't have enough time. I love to bring people on like Matt to just tell you and call you on your bullshit. It's you got the same 24 hours. Now, before you may go, 20 businesses, what is that? Well, my man has the number 1 and number 4 Orange Theory in the nation. That's out of 1,300 gyms stateside. And there's in 30 other countries. So my suggestion to you is if you listen to this driving down the road, pull off on the side of the road. Don't even worry about going to the job you hate, and make sure you have pen and paper ready to take some nuggets from a man that I absolutely look up to. And so with that being said, Matt, let's open this up with the way that, it all is. Let's start in the beginning. What made you decide I'm going to go onto the entrepreneur journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I got in fitness when I was 17 years old, right? I was actually recruited off the floor. I was the young meathead who enjoyed working out. People would ask me questions. I talked to them, smile on my face, what have you. The fitness manager at the time was like, "Hey, dude, you ever thought about a career in fitness?" And I'm like, "Hell yeah, right? I love working out. I love fitness. I was actually planning to go to ASU out here in Phoenix for a degree in business and kinesiology. I had an academic full ride, and I was like, yes, this is right up my alley. This is perfect. About 90 days into it, I was like, this sucks. I hated it, man. I hated it. And I tell you why. And it's kind of resonated through my entire career. I hated it because I cared more about their goals than they did, right? I'm like, Mrs. Jones, we get sold on this. And I'm like, yes, I'm so excited for your goals. Your goals are now my goals. We're in this together. Let's do this. She comes back in a week and I'm like, how's your diet been? And she's like, pretty good. Well, what does pretty good mean? That's pretty subjective, right? Like, what does that mean to you? Well, I did mess up a couple times. We'll talk about what messing up means. Well, I had pizza. Okay, I can appreciate balance to an extent, right? Talking about pizza. Well, I had a whole pizza, and I did that 2 or 3 times, and then we went to Burger King on the way back from the kids' soccer practice, and I'm like ripping my hair out. I'm like, Mrs. Jones, you sat here and cried to me, told me that you want to lose 40 pounds, explained all the emotional reasons as to why, and now I want to shake you because you can't stop shoving your face, right? I got out of that very quickly. I was like, I just can't do it. But I'll tell you, I was very good at the sales process. So fast forward, at 18 years old, I was overseeing an entire big box location. Fast forward beyond that, I was a regional vice president, and I was overseeing 22 different locations, hundreds of employees, managing between $500,000 and $600,000 of monthly recurring revenue out of each location on a monthly basis. And I did so very, very well. I actually ran the number one region in the nation for over 18 months straight. However, I was a slave to the job. You talk about people not having time. I literally missed the first 18 months of my son's life. I spent anywhere between 15 and 18 hours working every day. My boss was East Coast. So at 6 a.m. his day started, which means likely my day started at 3 a.m. is when my phone rang, right? Matt, what's the plan for the day? Where are we at? How are we doing? What about this studio? What about that? It was rough, right? I cut my teeth on that, but I loved it. I loved work. I loved the grind. I loved the hustle. The part that I didn't love, and the part that still to this day pulls at my heartstrings, is I missed the first 18 months of my son's life. Our quality time together when he was up in the middle of the night screaming because his stomach hurt, that's when I spent time with him. I left and he was asleep. I came home and he was asleep. It was a tough time. And I said, you know what? I had a hard conversation with myself, and I said, I can walk away from $250,000 a year, and I think I'm going to. Because I can't buy back my time. I can't buy back this time with my son. And I said, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all in on myself. If there's one person I'll bet on, it's me, and I will always do it to this day. Now, that said, I did not get into business with the expectation like I'm going to be a business owner and I'm going to set my own hours. And I'll tell you that, Danny, that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions to being an entrepreneur or a small business owner is like, I'm just going to set my own hours. That's bullshit. Can I say that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Cuss all day long.
Okay. It is. It's bullshit, right? And the reason I say that is you have now put up your home as collateral. I tapped all of my savings. I solicited friends and family. I went out and got an SBA loan. I literally burned the boats. There was no other way in the world that I could provide for my family if this didn't work. And I had all of this looming over me. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this, right? So I went in, did my first studio. I'll be honest, man, despite 10, 12 years in the big box world, my first studio opening was lackluster, right? And I was like, oh shit, how am I going to feed my kid? Really? I mean, there was points in there where I was like, do I pay the mortgage or do I buy groceries? Right. And I was like, well, I guess, my man has to eat. So I fed him and, ended up, late on a mortgage payment or two. And it's, that's not my norm. That's not my normal MO there, but it had to happen. And I was like, I got to figure out this model. I have to figure this out and I have to make it go. Well, then 8 months I was turning people away. You'd sign up and say, hey, Matt, today is Thursday. Today is Friday. I want to get in tomorrow. And I'm like, tomorrow, like Saturday. You're like, yes, sir, tomorrow, Saturday. And I'm like, how about next Saturday? No, like tomorrow. I'm excited, Matt. Like, let's do this. I'm sorry, Danny. Unfortunately, all of our classes are full. So as my revenue and my member base was up here, it actually started to decline, which, I mean, in theory is a good problem, but it's a problem nonetheless. I start losing member base. I start losing dollars. And I was like, oh man, we got to do this. So that necessitated location number 2. Within under 4 years, 2 went to 7, 5 were ground up builds, 2 were acquisitions from struggling owners. One of those was a redheaded stepchild in the network, and everyone was like, don't buy this. It was one of the first corporate owned stores. It was location number 3 out of the now 1,300. And everyone was like, don't touch that, right? It was corporate owned. It was sold to an absentee owner at that. And then, it was barely getting by. I'm talking like minimal profit, if any. Dude lived out in St. Louis. Operation was out here in Arizona, and they were like, don't buy it. And I'm like, you know what, dude, I'm so confident in my team and my ability to replicate the system and the process and the culture and the model that I have built here within inside this vehicle. I'm going to do it. 30 days later, we net $42,000. So I went from a $4,000 net when I purchased it. 30 days later, I 10x that bottom line, right? And I don't say that as a bragging point, but I will say there is, economy of scale. There is a lot of validity behind duplication of process. And I'll tell you what I see, Dan, and coaching a lot of small business owners, especially in the studio space, is it's not replicatable. Whether it's them selling and they're charismatic and their personality and they're so passionate about the model and the brand and what they do, oftentimes they haven't actually created a duplicatable process to allow themselves to be replicated in their team and then their business to be replicated in multiple locations. But I'll tell you, I figured that out early. And honestly, I say this tongue in cheek, but I did so because I'm lazy, man. And I say that tongue in cheek. I'm not actually lazy. I love working, but I like working smarter, not harder, right? I think that's super cliche, but it's so freaking true. Like, how can I optimize this system? How can I optimize this process? How can I make more efficient? And how can I grow to scale? Were always the questions that I was asking. I'm a legal pad junkie. Literally, I carry this thing around with me all the time. And when I was doing this in studio, I was literally writing down what I was doing every single day to the point that I was like, okay, unlock the door, turn on the lights, turn on the TV, start the music, right? Like so in the weeds, but that way I could duplicate this 100%. When you go to McDonald's, whether you're going in Maryland, whether you're coming out here in Phoenix, you go to McDonald's and a Big Mac is a Big Mac is a Big Mac is a Big Mac. If your Big Mac out here in Phoenix is different than your Big Mac out in Maryland, we got a problem, right? And as a consumer, you're like, what is this? This is not what I'm accustomed to. This is not what I'm used to, right? And if we have the standard set, and mind you, a Big Mac to me is not the standard, but when we have the standard set, right, it's very, very easy for your team to buy into this. And this is how we do things, right? When you can get that burned into your team's brain that this is how we do things, your business elevates. Your life elevates. I mean, you see with the family.
There's so much to unpack from everything that you said there. I think I'll start with this one because I see this, and it's funny because I've been giving some of this advice to some studio owners, literally in the last 2 days. And it is, let's delve into complexity, because where I think a lot of people run into problems is because of what you said. I can't duplicate you. I can't duplicate your passion. I can't duplicate your charisma. I can't duplicate your skill set. And what a lot of folks think is complex is they're actually thinking more grandiose. They're thinking like it's 15 different sales processes or 15 different purchase options. It's 13 different class setups. It's all this. And the reality is complexity is more than just offerings, though that does do it. You see this a lot of time in fitness studios. Well, I'm gonna have a strength day, and then I'm gonna have a cardio day, and then I'm gonna have small group, then I'm gonna have large group, then I'm gonna have a gym, then I'm gonna have personal training, then I'm gonna have this. That's complex. But where I think a lot of people lose sight of complexity is the real problem is the people. All of those different services require a different person to deliver them, or a super, super talented person to be able to deliver more than one set. But even more than that, you talk about difference. Like if I've got two different people saying the thing, they're saying it different, right?
That's
and
right.
It's crazy because we talk about communication. Like communication is 10% what we say, and then it's 45% tonality and 45% body language. And so that's a whole lot that's going to change from person to person. So when you look at complexity and you're looking at a business, whether you're looking to purchase a business or start another business, or if you're coaching someone on business, when you want to kiss it, when you want to keep it simple, stupid, when you want to avoid complexity, what are you looking at personally?
I look at like the process map, right? So we'll speak to fitness real fast. Our business in fitness, and this is applicable to all business because I've owned businesses and still do in multiple modalities. But I'll tell you, business is simple. Now, I don't want to confuse the word simple with the word easy because they are
Yeah.
vastly different, right? But
Yeah.
business is simple, okay? We need to acquire leads, right? People need to know about our brand. We need to nurture those leads. We need to get those leads into our business. We need to deliver on that promise. Then we need to convert that, and then we need to keep them, right? Just like in a relationship, they need to continue to choose us day in and day out. And then when we can deliver the results and they can continue to choose us and we have this phenomenal product that we're delivering or service, then they're going to tell their friends. And really that's it, right? So I like to think of this customer journey, right? And then how can we work to optimize and make more efficient the entire process? And to that point, how can we systemize each of those processes? Now, when I say systemize, I don't want you to think that I have a team of 500 robots because that's certainly not it. I want Danny Farrar to be Danny Farrar, and Matt Kafora is going to be Matt Kafora. Like you said, there's a lot of variation in that communication aspect of things. That said, the framework to each of these steps in this customer journey has to be provided. And in fact, I want you to be you because your personality is different. I tell you what, man, if there was 10 of me or 10 of you, that's a tough business right there, right? Like we're
Yeah.
not everyone's cup of tea, and I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah.
But we need that good mix for the member base. We need that good mix for the consumer. So really that's what I do is let's get granular and let's carry around your legal pad. Let's document this entire customer journey. Once we have that very, very clearly articulated, now we dive in. What's cool with that is that thing never changes, right? When I say that, now I can look at the entire sales process and I say, okay, where is something broken, right? And I go back to this customer journey. And I say, okay, the KPIs to this are tied to this step in the customer journey. This is the lever that I need to pull, right? Oh, KPIs look good with the exception of this guy right here. Now I have this diagnostic tool and I align that with my KPIs, my key point indicators, my metrics, the numbers that I'm gauging my business's success on. And I know where exactly I need to drop that in. Now, Danny, that's if you're in one location or 20 locations, right? Because this is that systemized process. This is the big map that we've now built.
You know, when we talk about building the systems and processes, there's a couple different routes I want to go with this because one of the first things I thought about when you said, listen, I was absolutely murdering it in the big box space, right? I was one of their top employees. And I think where a lot of people get in trouble is they're like, I am the top employee. So I'm the widget maker, right? They talk about this in the E-Myth. I make the best widgets on planet Earth. And so therefore I should start my own business. But even a guy like you that was, top of class, full ride scholarship, killed on the side, you talked about, hold on, I shifted to now I am, quote unquote, the man. And holy fuck, I actually didn't start off great at all.
Yeah.
Now you were able to pivot. I hate that word after COVID, but you're able to pivot and make adjustments and get this ship right. But so many people get off and they get to that point, they get slapped in the face, and then they stop. Were you surprised that it just didn't adapt like that? And for people that may be employees that are looking to go start a side hustle, do their own thing, what advice and tips would you give with them to try to limit the amount of shock that they're going to get when they're actually in the driver's seat?
Yeah. Was I surprised? Hell yeah, I was. I was king shit, right? I was like, I got this, right? I had looked at other P&Ls for the model and I was like, what do? This is crazy. I got to get on this. I will crush this. I got my teeth kicked in, right? Like we talk about being on the bus with business. I tell you what, Danny, I was on the bus. There was no freaking windshield. I'm taking shrapnel to the face. Like this was brutal. And I was like, wow. And I was 24 years old, right? So relatively speaking, I was a kid. I was a kid to
Yeah.
business ownership. And I had some early success. And I don't know that tainted me, but I had high expectations for myself. And I was probably a little bit too arrogant in the approach. And I'll tell you what, I remember it vividly. I had a conversation with myself, right? I'm driving back from the studio and I broke down, man. I broke down. I'm like, I am failing,
Yeah.
right? I'm failing myself. I'm failing my family. I'm failing those people that I've pulled money from that I said, hey, I'll do this. I'm awesome at this. And that's a hard conversation to have. And especially at 24 years old, to hold that mirror up, shit, even now at 37 years old, right? You hold that mirror up and it's a really, really hard conversation to have. And it's humbling, but it was necessary. And I don't know what happened in that conversation with myself, when I had my breakdown there, but I walked in the next day and I was like, I'm going to freaking figure this out. I don't have a choice but not to figure this out. So I can sit in my woes and, why I was so good, I don't understand, and it's just going to take time. That's bullshit, right? Those are the excuses that you're feeding yourself. And it's like, if that's the story you're telling yourself, your outcome's not going to change, right? So I know that something needed to change. A switch flipped in my brain and I said, I'm going to figure this out. And I did, right? So when we moved to this, idea of let me create this side hustle, or I'm a really good coach and I have a super, big loyal following in my classes and all this, and I'm just going to go create my own brand. I'm going to create my own business. A dose of reality is a real thing, right? And I'll say, no matter where you're at, and for those that want to go start their own business or their side hustle, I applaud you, right? That is having that thought process and then taking action on that is something that a very, very slim percentage of the population does. Now, that said, I will say humble yourself. Humble yourself before you even begin to think about that process, because as good as you are there, it is something new. It is something different. And you can take some of the soft skills and the skill sets and the experience that you've acquired over the years and apply it to this. But understand, you were starting at ground zero. You're also starting at ground zero with your own pocketbook, which a lot of people don't understand. So when we move to this side hustle, I'll say first and foremost, button up what you will have first. If you're in a 9 to 5, make sure that is on lock, right? Get very, very good at the one thing that you're doing that will provide for you in the immediate, whether that's one location, whether that is your 9 to 5. And then once that is locked up, then you go. But you approach that go with that humility and that student mindset, right? You've got to learn. And if you are resistant to learning and you're resistant to being hungry to grow, you can't rest on those laurels of what you've done in the past, because the past is not the present and the present is certainly not going to be your future. So you've got to stay flexible with that and stay humble. I'll say that's the biggest lesson I learned, man, honestly, is like going from like, I'm king shit making $250,000 a year to like, I can't pay my freaking mortgage.
It's funny because everybody knows about the quote that Mike Tyson says, well, everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face. But actually, my favorite Mike Tyson quote is, man isn't meant to be humbled. He's meant to be humbled. And, life is going to do that to you.
Yeah.
But what I think comes out of this, where a lot of people get in trouble, and I'm curious, and feel free to disagree with me on this, but I say this to people that everybody has imposter syndrome. Everybody thinks that there's somebody out there that has it figured out. But the reality is no one has it figured out, right? They have it figured out to their level.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people out there, I've got 10 studios figured out. I don't have 50 studios figured out. How do I know this? Because I don't fucking have 50 studios, right? So I could run one studio with my eyes closed. But for somebody that's just opening that first studio, they're like, oh my God, how the fuck do you do this? Like, this is the hardest, most difficult thing to do out there. And so for me, I'm like, I try to explain to people, you're never going to get rid of imposter syndrome. You're never going to never going to get to the point where you don't walk into some rooms and feel like, fuck, should I be here? Because you should be walking into new rooms that are a higher level than you. How do you, if you agree with that concept, how do you prepare yourself for the new room?
Yeah, you're spot on. That is spot on. It's funny that you asked me that. I had lunch with a guy yesterday who I've known for a long time. In fact, he owned the personal training company within LA Fitness that I actually worked for. And I had lunch with him. He exited, and I don't know how many locations LA Fitness had back then, and I don't know how many they have now, but it's a ton. He exited his business when he was 34 years old. He sold that entire model to LA Fitness. Danny, I'm telling you, when I am the low man on the totem pole in this conversation, I sat there and I was like, I'm eating up whatever he says, right?
Yeah.
And he's obviously evolved. He's now 50, 51 years old. And I'm like, I'm feeling like I've done nothing in my life, right? Despite my successes, I'm like, I have so much more to do, to the point where I'm like, I am jotting down notes, right? I am not the smartest man in that room or in that conversation. And I freaking love it, right? This is that humility. This is that humbleness. It doesn't matter what you've done, right? There's always someone who has done more and always someone who wants to level up. And I'll tell you, I talked to this gentleman and I can't even imagine what his net worth is, but I'll tell you, it's a lot. He's talking about flying private and doing this and doing that and spending time with the family and, making all these other investments. And I'm thinking like, man, I've never flown private. And I'll tell you what, at 50, 51 years old, this man says, I have so much more to learn. And I'm like, time out. You exited your company. I'll venture to say this was a 10-figure exit.
Yeah.
You exited your company nearly 20 years ago, likely a very, very large payday. And you're sitting here 20 years later telling me you have so much more to learn. But the people that have that level of humility and the people who always have this learning mindset are those that are going to win. I mean, this man is sharing with me investing strategies that he learned from reading tons and tons of Warren Buffett books. And like, this is what I'm doing currently. I don't know if it's right or wrong. I've had some wins. I've had some losses, more wins than losses. I think it's good, but I don't know. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep consuming knowledge, and I'm going to keep talking to people and learning from people and seeking out mentors that are at the level higher than me. It's the second that we stop learning, right? And it seems super, cliche. But it's the second that we stop learning or we think we're the smartest one in the room, like that's when you fail, right? That's when you stop growing. And I just can't even fathom being that person, because I'm literally sitting there and I was like, I feel like I've done nothing in my life compared to this man. And it was insane.
I think it's probably the biggest dichotomy in life, because there's always, and you can relate this to anything. You can relate this to the person that's overweight and unhealthy, but they're trying, and there's somebody that's more overweight, more unhealthy, that wishes they were that person, right? And so wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you're always going to see somebody that is further along than you are. And I was having this conversation with somebody, and I was like, fuck, I thought I would be so much further ahead than I am right now. And it's like, well, you got 10 studios. I know, but fuck, man, I thought I would be at 500 by now. And you're like looking at it, and it's weird because it's hard to not go into this. Like, the reason I say it's a dichotomy is you got to use it to motivate you, but you have to be really, really fucking careful that you don't let it take you the other way, as like, man, I'm a piece of shit. I don't do anything. I haven't figured it out, which is why one of my favorite things to do is add comma yet. I haven't figured it out yet. And so when you're setting it, let's just talk about getting to that table, because I think this is one of the things that people really struggle with. Everyone has go get a mentor, go find somebody that's further ahead than you are. Okay, that sounds fucking great in theory, but I got a 9-to-5 job. I have no investments. I have done nothing in business. How the fuck do I put myself at that table? What tips would you have for people there?
Network. When I say network, I, by happenstance in 2020, pre-COVID, bumped into this gentleman at my barber shop. Literally at the barber shop. Dude's getting his hair cut across the way from me, and I hear him talking fitness stuff. Dude's in great shape, super lean, and I'm like, hey man, what do you do for working out? Right? I'm thinking like, how can I solicit this guy for business? I didn't know who he
Yeah.
was. And he goes, oh yeah, I work out over here. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. What have you been doing? And we just started chopping it up. Come to find out, he was the gentleman that owned that company. We've stayed in contact since 2020. And I literally just reached out to him. I said, hey man, I would love to stay in contact with you, see what you're up to and do that. We text back and forth to the point where he's like, hey brother, how are you? Hope you have a great day. Let me know when you want to grab a round of golf. Right. But it's literally just about putting yourself out there. And it's not like I had all the time in the world. I went to the barbershop. Danny, I know it doesn't look like I do, but this thing doesn't come
I
without.
kept my mouth shut. I was like, this must have been like 7
You know
years
what
ago.
the barbershop is? Yeah, I know what it is. But I literally went there and it's like, well, I don't have the time. I work 9 to 5. Danny, you get your hair cut. I don't care if you work 9 to 5, 9 to 9, 6, 7 days a week. You get your hair cut, right? You go to dinner. If you were talking to people and putting yourself out there, and again, this is the humility piece of things, right? And I literally sat there and drank in everything that he said and said, hey, this is a crazy impactful conversation to me. I know your time is valuable and I appreciate that. I bought him lunch, which is nowhere near the value of his time. But I said, would you mind if I reached out to you in a little bit and, in 30 days, 60 days, what have you, just kind of stay in contact and continue to pick your brain a little bit. I won't be the asshole, right? The guy who asks questions, asks for advice, and
I use
takes
that
no
all the
action,
time. Don't be
right?
an
I'm like, don't
asshole.
be that
Absolutely.
guy. Don't be that guy, right? Because oftentimes people that want to provide mentorship, he told me, he's like, Matt, if there's an investment opportunity that comes your way and you think it's good, reach out to me. Let me know. I would love to do something with you. I like making money with my friends.
Yeah.
I'm still riding high from that. That was 24 hours ago. I'm still riding high from that comment. I'm like, less about the, hey, I'll give you some money to invest in something, but more about the fact that like he saw something in me because I was able to humble myself. I came with this growth mindset of like, hey, let me take in everything that you can share with me. And I will take this, apply it, and use it. I actually bought the 2 Warren Buffett books that he talked about yesterday. They were in my Amazon cart before I left that parking lot.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, our next conversation, those will be topic of conversation.
Let me ask you this, because I think you kind of hinted at this when you're like, well, I bought him lunch, and that's not even a fucking tenth, a percentage point of what the value of that call was. I think one of the biggest things that limit people when it comes to networking and trying to put themselves out there is that they feel they don't have any value for these people, right? And I know, some of the training and stuff that we've gone through and that I've gotten from you where you're like, lead with value, right?
Always.
Don't ask, right? Lead with value. What can I do for you? And that makes so much sense. But if you're, again, that person who you feel like, I'm just stuck in people always throw just in front of as a qualifier for everything they do. I just do this or I just do that. And they don't feel like they have value. How do they maximize networking?
Yeah, you have to remove that limiting belief because I'll tell you this. Danny, how old are your girls?
8 and 5.
Okay. So I know I see River, and that name sticks in my head. So River's the young one, correct? River's 5 years old?
No, River's the old. She's 8.
River's older.
The young one's Willow. Yep.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Okay. So either way, let's talk about this for a second, and I'll get to my point here, I swear.
Yeah.
So we have River and Willow. Okay. They come home from school. Daddy, daddy, daddy. How was your day? Right? And you're having conversations. Now, Danny, you were what, 40 years old?
I'm 44, unfortunately.
You're
I'm getting
44
up
years
there.
old. Man, how
Yeah.
come I have more gray than you?
I
I'm doing
don't
something
know.
wrong, bro.
I don't
Okay.
know.
So you're 44, you have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. I see your posts and I've talked to you on a personal level. How much have you learned from your 5-year-old and 8-year-old daughters?
Oh, so much.
So
Yeah.
much. So we, as adults, oftentimes have this comparison in our head, and we're like, oh, I'm just this. I have nothing to offer. I don't have the value to offer. Get rid of that shit. Every single person has a story to tell and value to offer. Without going too deep into this man's business, he then shares with me, after we build some real quick rapport, that he's just wrapping up a divorce.
Yeah.
Been there, done that, man.
Yeah.
Let him talk about it. He opened up a little bit. We chatted about it. Let me share my experiences with my ex-wife and, how we navigated the co-parenting, right? And how I feel that there were some successes to that and some struggles, and offered up some advice, right? Unsolicited, albeit, but it was some of my experiences, and here's what I've learned. Then he exited for hundreds of millions of dollars. He flies private. He has boatloads of money. He's never experienced that before.
Yeah.
I was able to offer that value to him. Your 5-year-old and 8-year-old daughters, right? They look through a different lens than you do, and you're like, you got to be kidding me. You just
Yeah.
taught me something today. At 5 years old, I
Yeah.
learned from my daughter. So I'll tell anybody out there listening, get rid of that limiting belief. Have some conviction and some confidence in you, because every single person on this planet has a story to tell. And you
Yeah.
not sharing that story, you not sharing your trials and tribulations, your experiences, your successes, you are robbing the world of your story and your value. So get rid of that limiting belief and share. Talk to freaking people. That's the only way that you can add value to that. And that's the only way.
You talk about everybody having like, he's on the surface, like everything's killing. He's exiting the business. He's flying private. But there's always the stories behind those stories. I mean, somebody would look at you and they'd be like, man, this dude's big as a brick shit house. He's in shape. Great. He's probably always been in shape his whole life. He doesn't know what it's like to struggle with being out of shape. But then in COVID, we break both knees and you're literally in a wheelchair. So what did that experience shape you in any way? Did it teach you anything? Did it give you any understanding or empathy for people that listen, like maybe they've never been in shape, or maybe they've gotten out of shape and having to rebuild in that? And what lessons did the fitness aspect of this bring into the other areas of your life?
I'll tell you, funny you bring that up. That was the most humbling experience of my life. And I'll tell you that. So I'll keep it short here. I was moving a commercial step mill, right? Big step mill. We get up there on the gauntlet, whatever. I'm carrying this step mill out of my garage, loading it onto a U-Haul. My parents wanted it at their house. No problem. I'll help you out. I'm a big boy then. Danny, I was like 305, like abs
Yeah.
305. Like I was not
Yeah.
soft by any means. And I'm carrying this step mill one half, my dad's carrying the other, and I'm walking up and I'm approaching this ramp at the U-Haul ramp, right? Didn't see the ramp, slipped, hyperflexed both quads. I ended up with bilateral patella tendon ruptures. I am now 305 pounds. It is May of 2020. My businesses are closed. I am bleeding millions of dollars in lost revenue. And I'm now laying in the fetal position on the Phoenix concrete. It's 10 a.m. in the morning. It's
Okay.
May in Phoenix. Dude, I am like a fried egg, right? I'm laying there cooking. And I look down and my kneecap is on the outside of my thigh. I look at the other leg and it's the same exact thing. I can't straighten my legs. There is literally nothing attaching my lower leg to my upper leg. I'm laying there in the fetal position. Fire EMS comes, they're, how should we pick you up? And I'm like, don't care. Toss me on a backboard, get me in a litter. I don't care. Let's
Yeah.
go. This is hot. My knees hurt, right? Emergency surgery. I end up in the ER. Oddly enough, one of the nurses who comes in is pumping me full of drugs at the time, looks at my chart and goes, Matt Kafora? And I'm like, lady, I'm not interested in conversation right now, right? Like I'm angry, I'm hurting, and I'm like, this is all downhill for me, right? This is all bad. And she goes, I'm one
Yeah.
of your members.
No shit.
And I was like, well, how about that? Thank you, man. Does that mean I can get a few more, pumps of that? Because I'm really in some pain. Emergency surgery, 8 o'clock that night. Doctor comes in. I had never talked to this man before in my life. And I'll tell you, I appreciate those in the medical profession with good bedside manner, because this guy obviously had no clue where my head was. Walks in and looks at my knees and goes, all right, I'm going to be your surgeon. We'll get you fixed up here. It'll be a couple hour long surgery. It's going to be a painful recovery, probably one of the most painful surgeries that you could ever experience. Beats spinal, beats total knee, all of that stuff. And, in about 4 to 6 months, you're going to have to relearn to walk. Time out, doc. You see me. Listen, I'm not a cardio fan by any means, but I obviously have some fitness background. And I said, whoa, 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 holy shit. You said I will relearn to walk. He goes, yep. All right, see you in there. And I'm left with that as he walks away. Okay, so fast forward, right? I wake up out of surgery. I am completely immobile, hips to ankles, legs locked completely straight. Okay, and I'm like, all right, this is crazy. Maybe a day goes by. I don't know. I'm still kind of hazy from the drugs. And they say, okay, you can't go home, right? You can't care for yourself. You've got to go to a rehab facility. Well, a rehab facility at that time was a very fancy way of saying your ass is going to a nursing home. So now I'm in the heart of COVID. I have now
Dude, you went
lost
to
the
an
ability.
actual nursing home, like an old folks nursing home?
My man, I lived in a 10 by 10 foot room. It was a rehab facility, but the rehab facility, I was hands down by far, at least by 30 years, the youngest individual in there. I lived in a 10 by 10 foot room. There's a tiny TV right in front of me on the bed, and there's a giant clock. Now, this is probably my imagination, but I swear to God, this clock was 3 feet wide, right? All I saw was this stupid ass clock, and time moved so slowly. So for 23 hours a day, I was bedridden, completely
Ugh.
immobile. I couldn't get up to go to the bathroom. Hell, I couldn't pick my legs straight up in bed and do a leg lift. Talk about humbling. I literally could not care for myself. And what was the worst part is I was trapped in my mind, right?
Oh,
Idle
yeah.
hands is the devil's playground.
Yeah.
I literally sat there and I'm thinking about, woe is me. I can't walk. I'm not training. I'm not eating. I'm losing millions of dollars in lost revenue. And I'll tell you, Danny, and I haven't shared this with many people, but I went to a very, very dark place.
Yeah.
To the point where, fast forward 30 days, and I told the doctor, if I do not get out of here today, you won't find me in here alive later.
Yeah.
Right? And selfish, right? In my brain, looking back, and I was like, that was a very selfish comment, but that's where my head was, right?
Yeah.
And it was a very dark place. And I'll tell you, I talked to a couple of friends during that time, and I say talk to them, I talked to them on the phone, because remember, we're in COVID,
Yeah.
right? I'm in a
Yeah.
10 by 10 foot room. There's a window off to the side here. And this was my son peeking through the window, waving, hi, dad,
Yeah.
right? That was it. That was the extent of my visitors for 30 days, 23 hours a day bedridden. And that was it. Talked to a couple friends, and they shared with me Goggins' book, right? And I had read Goggins' book before, Can't
Yeah.
Hurt Me. And I'll tell you, I popped in the audio of that. They were like, you need to listen to this.
Yeah.
And they followed up with me daily. And I tell you, I put that book in and I'm like, stop being a bitch.
Yeah.
Right. And so going back to your point of like, we are, 30, 40 pounds overweight. We lost, the shape that we once had. We're struggling at work. We're struggling at home in our relationships. Coming out of that, Danny, that paradigm shift in my mindset allowed, I swear to you, allowed my healing to accelerate, right? I believe in
Yeah.
so much mental connection to that. And it reframed everything in my life. And it did so because at the end of the day, I'm actually in the process of writing a book. I know you wrote yours, so I got big
That's
shoes to
awesome.
fill. But I'm in
Yeah.
the process of writing a book, right? And it's going to be titled Someone Always Has It Worse, right?
Yeah.
And that reframe in anything that you're doing, whether it's the ability to walk or that to be taken away, whether it's the struggles at home with, kids, or your significant other in a relationship, or your 9 to 5 that you hate, or you getting your teeth kicked in business. It taught me a huge, huge lesson in exercise and gratitude, right? And I wake
Yeah.
up every morning, despite how terrible I think my last day was, or how much I'm dreading today, and I find, what am I grateful for? And I'll tell you, Danny, prior to that experience, I thought it was bullshit. And I was like, that's woo woo,
Yeah.
like whatever. Like, oh, cool. Well, at least I have shoes to put on, right? Like, it is no longer that. And I'll tell you that reframe every day has significantly changed everything in my life. Now, my life is not perfect by any means. And I
Yeah.
still struggle with exercise and gratitude, but I'll tell you that reframe changes everything.
That's awesome. Man, it's crazy. I was just seeing the stuff on Instagram, but hadn't, heard the whole story. So this is just further proof that even like if you're checking in on people, you don't know everything that they're going through. I know your time is precious too. So as we hit to wrap this up, my question for you would be this. If you had one hard truth, if you had that one hard truth that you wanted to share with people that you've learned through your life, that you're like, listen, if you incorporate this, I promise you, your life's not going to necessarily get easier, but it is going to be better. What would that be?
Remain a student, right? Remain a student. You can never stop learning. And I know it sounds super cliche, and I hope some of my stories have helped to bring to light that it's more than just a cliche. But the second that you stop desiring to better yourself or taking your foot off the gas and coasting, you'll fall. You'll fall. The speed will slow down, and you will drift further and further away from where you want to be. Now, all of that said, as you're looking to grow and advance and scale, and you have this thirst for knowledge and thirst for more, slow down to speed up, right? Get very, very good at where you're at, so that way you can kind of start to diversify that time. Even if you're in a 9 to 5 right now, there's 168 hours in a week. 9 to 5, you're working 40 hours a week. What are you doing from 5 to 10? Right? And if you were hungry and you were consuming that knowledge, shoring up that process, get that thing so good to where you can start to abandon that 9 to 5, and you can now transition from your 9 to 5 with your side hustle to now your full-time hustle. And before you can continue that run, get so damn good at that you could do it all over again, and you're not in it. But if you're not staying hungry to that, if you're not having that desire to learn and grow and remaining humble through that process, you'll fail. No doubt, you will fail.
That's awesome, man. Slow down to speed up. That's to be title of the episode. I love that. Hey guys, if you got anything out of this episode, please by all means like, subscribe, and share. Make sure that you go find, I'll tag his pages and stuff, and make sure you follow Matt. He has a wealth of knowledge. And always remember this, guys. The first step to the storm should be your own. Until next time, keep living, head down, horns up. Salute.